I've been a trucker for many years now, and one night I was parked off an exit ramp at about 3 a.m. at the beginning of my 10-hour break. The moon was full, high in the sky, and casting enough light to see everything around me. I spotted something that stood out, a figure standing still in the middle of a cut-off cornfield not too far from where I was parked. It looked human, but the way it was standing motionless in the field made me decide against that. I figured it was probably an old-timer who had put up a scarecrow or something for his grandkids. I shrugged it off and began to watch YouTube videos in the cab, trying to unwind before turning in for bed. After a few minutes, I thought that I saw some movement in my peripheral vision. I switched off my truck lights and peered out into the cornfield. The figure was still there. It seemed closer though, but I really had no way to be sure it had moved. Now I was feeling a little bit uneasy, but I was safe in my locked truck cab. The highway was dead quiet, no cars passing except one every 10 minutes or so. Eventually, nature called and I had to pee. I didn't want to deal with the hassle of peeing in a water bottle inside my truck, so I made myself get out of the truck. As I stepped out, I took another look at the figure. Still in the same place, right where I figured it should be, nothing wrong at all. I walked around the front of my truck and then went to stand in between the trailer and the cab on the passenger side and did my business. I tried my hardest not to freak myself out and just pee, but I couldn't help it. I had to look out into the field again and the figure to make sure that it was still there, even though I hadn't ever seen it move and it could have very well have been in the same spot. I gave in and looked out into the field, and to my surprise, the figure was gone. There was nothing upright anywhere I looked. The whole field was just flat. I rushed to finish up, jumped back into the truck, and slammed my door shut. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, and I had to get out of there. I didn't care about the time or if I was breaking any rules by driving where I was supposed to be on a break. I needed to get away from that spot, away from that field, as it was really creeping me out now and I wasn't going to be able to fall asleep. I drove for about 40 minutes before I pulled into a Love's gas station. It was well lit and full of trucks. I haven't stopped on an exit ramp to sleep since then. I don't know what I saw out there or if it was just my mind playing tricks, but I'm not taking any chances anymore. Not when it's that quiet and dark in the middle of nowhere. Who knows what could happen? In 2003, I had met a guy that said he would take me on adventures and make my life exciting. I lived in a small town and had never really traveled outside of my state. We were kind of sheltered from the big crime and other things that happen in our country. My now ex-boyfriend took me on a journey of being a cross-country truck driver. In a lot of cases, this was a great experience involving fun times, and I got to see most of the US. But it wasn't all great. Life on the road is much different now than it was when we were trucking. People now have more technology than we did, as the only forms of entertainment we had was either watching one of the dozen or so DVDs, reading yet another book, or talking on the radio to other truckers. We often opted for talking on the radio, and we met this one trucker who we originally viewed as a friend, whose trucker codename on the radio was Maniac. We talked to him over the radio whenever our paths would cross, as we frequented the same interstate often. On the trucker radio, there had been lots of talk about murders happening at truck stops along our interstate route. Nobody really knew if it was real or just stories truckers would make up to pass time on the radio. We had kept hearing about these stories and even brought it up to our friend Maniac, and he just laughed. Maniac said, "It must just be a story because if it's true they would have caught him already. With as bloody and messy as the murders are, I bet he wants to be caught." It seemed like a weird thing to say, but he was a very weird guy, so it was totally in character for him. One night after dinner at a truck stop, my boyfriend and I walked down the row and saw a truck parked in the parking lot about 6 spots down from us. It was dark out, but the truck was maybe a dark black or blue. I don't remember seeing what type of truck it was, just that it was kind of menacing in the dark. Old school trucker code was if you were looking for company, the driver would park and leave his reading red light on to tell lot lizards, which are hookers, that the driver was looking for entertainment. The guy was sitting in the passenger seat and he had the red reading light on so I could see his face. It was a little distorted, but he gave me the creepiest smile and then quickly shut his blinds. I could see his truck from ours, and I remembered looking back and seeing the red light still illuminating the porthole window in the passenger door. There was a small slit down the curtain that showed a dark spot, which meant he was still watching us. Even with as warm as it was, chills shot down my spine and I got a very uneasy feeling. We finally got back to the truck and turned on the radio for our night entertainment. The chatter for the night was all about an incident which had happened. People were saying there was a dead lot lizard. One driver started trying to explain what happened, but he had been told that he had to keep his mouth shut by a police officer. Being the nosy people we were, my ex and I jumped out of the truck to go investigate. We dodged in and out of the trucks and managed to wiggle our way up to the scene. You know when you hear the phrase that some things cannot be unseen? Well, this was one of those things. The lady, what was left of her, had been tied to the trailer and the truck. Basically, when the truck pulled away, she was torn apart. The driver, who was now sitting in the back of a police car, was crying big, heavy sobs. It was a rough scene, and we could hear them through the closed door. He was wailing that he had nothing to do with the woman being tied up to his truck, and he was praying to God to be forgiven for what he had done. The poor driver had obviously not done his safety check before he had just decided to pull out of his space and ripped her right in half. I ran away from there, and on my way back to the truck, I passed by the spot where the truck with the creepy guy from earlier had been parked, but he was gone now. Police later came by our truck asking for a statement and if we had seen anything. The only thing worth mentioning was the creepy guy whose truck was now gone, and I gave the cops his description. I just kept seeing the image from that murder for days in my mind, but after a few weeks, I finally got the image out of my head. Fast forward to about 3 months after the incident, and we were heading to New Orleans. I was super excited to see the area, and hopefully get in to see Mardi Gras. We parked in this little truck stop, which wasn't really more than a hole-in-the-wall type of stop with a small dirt lot and a flickering light pole on one end. But it was within walking distance of the French Quarter, which is where I wanted to go. After we parked, we heard our good friend Maniac calling out to us on the radio. The voice on the radio was loud, so that meant he was close by. There were only 2 other trucks in the lot. We figured our friend was one of those trucks, and we had never actually met this guy, and thought maybe we would all finally meet. We asked Maniac if he wanted to meet up and grab some dinner. Maniac refused our offer, and with a chuckle he said that he rarely leaves his truck, and he's always worried about getting caught. My ex-boyfriend immediately questioned him on what he meant by getting caught. Maniac responded and said, "Don't you worry about it, just keep an eye on your girl. I'd really hate for something bad to happen to her like all those other girls." We watched the radio as he spoke, and the signal was so high that it had to be in the same truck stop as us. Maniac spoke to us again. "You know, with all the bad things I've been doing at the truck stops, I like to play with the lot lizards before I torture them and destroy them." My ex and I stared at each other in the silence as Maniac continued talking. He said, "They shouldn't be defiling themselves with what they do. I will continue to rid this world of the diseased ones that plague humanity." By the time he was finished talking, he was yelling, and it didn't help as his voice became louder and louder as a truck just then was driving past the truck stop. That was the only time I'd ever seen anything like fear in my ex's eyes. Tears began to well up, and for the first time I was truly scared as we sat in our truck together. A dust cloud came rolling up on the road by the truck stop, and a dark black menacing truck with a cattle guard and brow came rolling by slowly. We saw the driver as he went past the nose of our truck. It was that same creepy guy from the truck stop months ago where the lot lizard had been murdered. He smiled that disgusting smile at us as he put the mic to his lips, and over the radio he told us to be safe out there before driving away from the truck stop. Pinstriped in his driver's door it said "Maniac" in bright red letters. As far as we knew, there were 7 total murders. There could have been more. Who knows how long he had been at it for? I don't know if that guy was ever caught. I assumed that he had to have been caught since we told the police what type of truck he drove, but who knows? My ex-boyfriend and I took a break from trucking, but we ended up doing it for 1 more summer. The second time around though, I wasn't making friends with anyone on the road, and I always kept a 6-inch blade with me just in case I ever ran into Maniac. This happened a few years ago, but has impacted me greatly since then. I was in college living in an on-campus dorm house. My college was small, and the dorm house was an actual house that had been converted for dorm rooms. My vehicle broke down and had to be towed from my dorm's parking lot to a dealership 20 miles away. I called a local tow truck company who sent a truck out, and I decided to ride with the driver so that I could talk to the dealership service team about getting a rental. The whole drive down, the guy was talking about whatever hit his mind. I tried to be nice about it because it was a good 20 or 30-minute drive down, and I may as well have a conversation, and he was doing me a favor. Along with the drive down and drive back, after no luck with the rental, he turned from a random conversation to specifically talking about his ex and how she did him wrong. I was stuck in the truck with him, so I minimally responded and deflected when I could. He had the upper hand because I stupidly decided that riding with him was a good idea. When we finally got back to my dorm, I made it inside safely. I figured that it would be the end of it because I wasn't planning on needing a tow anytime soon. But then I started getting texts and calls from an unknown number. Turns out the tow truck driver copied my info off the tow request form the company filled out when I called for a truck. I got majorly freaked out because I didn't give my info to the company so their driver could harass me. I also had to deal with random drive-bys where the driver would stop and see if I was home, knocking on the door. After a week of texts, calls, and random visits, I called the owner to talk to him about his driver, and he gave me the old, well, maybe he just thought you were nice and you shouldn't be so stingy with him. I basically had to tell him that I would be filing a restraining order or some equivalent for him to take it seriously. I still think about this experience every time that I'm asked to give contact information for a home service job or see an unknown caller on my phone, and I've never ridden in another tow truck since. A few weeks ago, my girlfriend and I were in the home stretch of a big road trip with our dog. As it had been a while since we last stopped, we pulled into a rest stop off the freeway to stretch the legs and have the dog go to the bathroom. When we pulled into the rest stop, there were no cars and 3 big semi-trucks parked in a line. Immediately, my girlfriend got out to use the restroom. I leashed up the dog and stood next to her as she was walking towards the entry door, and I thought I heard someone yell behind me. To my surprise, it was a trucker in the driver's seat of his truck with the window rolled down trying to get my attention. Now, I'm generally pretty friendly towards all people whether they seem shady or not, and I'm generally willing to help a hand. Behind me in the truck was an older gentleman, large with gray hair and sunglasses. His truck was so loud I couldn't hear what he was saying, so I yelled back, "What?" The trucker yelled something inaudible 3 more times as I asked him, "What?" while shaking my head and holding up my hands to inform him that I couldn't hear him. At this point, he seemed visually annoyed that I had said "what" 4 times, which was understandable. I wanted to see what the deal was with this guy, so I walked halfway between the car and his passenger side truck. "What did you say?" I asked. "Can you help me look for my phone? I lost it somewhere," the trucker said. At this point, I was super caught off guard, as this had all unfolded within the 30 seconds that we parked at the rest stop. To me, it was weird that a trucker was asking a random person stopping at a rest stop to help him look for his phone, but maybe he just wanted me to call it. "Where did you lose it at?" I asked. "I lost it in my truck. Can you come up and help me look for it?" the trucker replied in an unnerving tone. In that moment, I was sketched out. Phone call I could do, but no way was I about to get in this trucker's cab to look for his phone. Even though I was a strong young man, who knows what he could have inside? I told him no way, sternly but half-heartedly, as I almost thought this guy was joking with me. After a few moments, the trucker said, "You won't help me look for it?" My adrenaline was pumping, so I yelled back, "Get out of here," in a threatening tone, even though I had nothing to defend us with if something should go wrong. I put the dog back in the car and pulled out my phone to pretend to call the cops. As I was doing this, he slowly drove down and then stopped again to ask if I was willing to help. I finally really screamed at him and told him to leave me alone or I was calling the cops. After that reply, he stepped on the gas and exited to the freeway. I stood and watched when finally my girlfriend exited the rest stop, wondering why I looked like I just saw a ghost. I don't know if it was an overreaction, but it sketched me out that he asked me to go into his semi-truck. For a little backstory, this happened when my now husband and I were moving from the east to west coast of the US. It was about 5 years ago and I was 21 at the time. This had been our second time making the trip, and this one was just to pick up a few last things and to grab our 2 dogs. At this point, we were just trying to make good time since we were tired of being on the road and would only stop for food and restroom breaks, so we weren't strangers to rest stops at odd hours of the day. I can't remember what state this happened in because we do a lot of traveling and rest stops have all blurred together over the years. Anyways, my husband had been driving for a while and it was time to switch off, walk our dogs, and stretch our legs. So we pulled into a rest stop at around 3 or 4 a.m. There was only one other vehicle in the lot and not that many truckers in the truck area. I jumped out of the car and let my husband know that I was going to run into the restroom before I let the dogs out. While I ran in, he was going to hang out by the car and have a smoke and keep an eye on our dogs. However, we parked our car by the dog area, and to get to the restrooms you had to walk over this hill. Therefore, we couldn't see the restrooms from our car. Being late at night, my husband decided to walk most of the way with me to make sure that I got there okay. I wasn't worried about it, but I didn't mind the extra comfort of having him there. I finished up in the restroom and came out to walk the dogs and let my husband take his restroom break. Even though it was late and I felt a bit cut off from the lit area of the rest stop, I wasn't worried. I'm a small woman, but my dogs are German Shepherd mixes and very protective of me. So I was walking my dogs and I let them do their business. I noticed that one of the semi-trucks that had been sitting on the far side of the stop started up and began slowly driving in my direction. Now, this didn't seem worrisome to me because they were on the trucker's side, and I was assuming they were going to exit and go back to the highway. I grabbed 2 doggy bags, cleaned up after my dogs, and then started heading to the trash can. As I was walking, I suddenly was blinded by bright headlights. I looked in the direction of the lights and I saw the semi-truck that I thought was leaving. It had pulled up as close as the truck lot got to the car lot, and the bright lights were aimed directly at me. I was angry that somebody was blinding me with their lights, and I quickly tossed the poop bags away and started walking back to my car. As I was walking away, the dude started flashing me with his lights repeatedly. I was almost to my car and was just wondering if I missed something and became more and more irritated. He started creeping his truck in my direction again while flashing his lights. My dogs sensed my irritation, and they immediately went on alert and started in the trucker's direction. I finally made my way next to my car, and the guy was still flashing his lights while stopping his truck in my direction again. I don't scare easily, so I decided to stand there and glare in his direction. Then he finally stopped flashing his lights. Good, I assumed he was done, and I started getting my keys out to unlock the car. Suddenly, my dogs stiffened beside me, and they began to growl. I heard a door opening and turned back in the trucker's direction. His door was now open, and I saw a foot starting to exit the truck. I was sitting there thinking this guy was a complete idiot, when at this point my husband showed up and wrapped his arm around me while flipping the trucker off. The trucker's foot disappeared back into his truck, and he shut the door and left the rest stop fast. I told my husband about him flashing his lights, and he explained to me that truckers use this method to flag women down at rest stops. I was really grossed out. I'm guessing that he thought I was alone because of how the rest stop was set up. However, I was in no way dressed like someone who would be interested in something like that. I was wearing layers because it was cold and driving a newer car. Plus, I'm not sure if he would have taken no for an answer, since why else would he begin to exit his truck after I was clearly not interested? Regardless of what he was trying to do, I do think the whole situation was creepy because the guy was obviously not quite there and was acting abrasive. If there are any women traveling solo out there, I warn you to be very careful at rest stops. I've been trucking for multiple decades at this point in my life, and there's occasionally odd or quirky things that you see on the drive. What I witnessed a couple weeks ago was definitely one of the oddest and one of the creepiest things I have seen while driving my truck. I was driving through the middle of the night somewhere in Nevada. Honestly, I don't really remember where, but I was surrounded by emptiness in the middle of the desert. Driving on highways in the middle of the night, especially not near any major cities, was normally very boring, and there weren't many cars on the road either. That night, I was cruising along listening to a podcast to help me stay awake. I was driving along and happened to catch up to a group of cars right in front of me. I noticed that the cars were all the same type of car. Nice black SUVs driving single file down the road, one after the other. Even more interestingly, the 3 cars' license plates were the Nevada state license plate, but each car only had one number on their license plates. The number on the license plates were 1, 2, and 3 in that order, with the car having the number 1 plates first in line, and the car with the plate that read number 3 at the end of the line. I followed these cars on the highway for many miles, intrigued the whole time about what these cars were doing. The only rational thought I could manufacture was that these cars were transporting people that were part of a bachelor or bachelorette party. Suddenly, the grouping of cars slowed down just a little bit, and then turned off the highway onto a dirt road that I had no idea was there. There was no street sign, mile marker, or anything else indicating that a road was going to be there. All 3 cars turned onto this dirt road, and quickly turned off their lights as soon as they were on the dirt road. I looked out into the desert towards where the cars had turned, but I could see nothing out there, not even the 3 cars as they blended into the darkness of the night. I didn't dare stop or check out the road they had turned onto. I just kept driving. The stretch of highway I was driving on was dead straight, and I kept checking behind me in my mirrors, looking for headlights to reappear onto the highway behind. However, mile after mile after mile, I saw no sign of a car getting back onto the highway. The grouping of black SUVs and the way they disappeared onto a road that wasn't even marked was eerie to me.
They had to have been down that road often if they knew where to turn in the dead of night without hardly slowing down, and who knows what business they were up to down that dirt road. A long time ago, I worked for a small trucking company based out of the northeastern part of the United States. There would be many overnight driving stints on lonely backwood highways in the middle of nowhere. I was driving on one of these single-lane highways in Pennsylvania earlier one morning at around 3 a.m. My high-beam headlights worked really well, and I could see a far distance in front of me. This saved me many times, as I had plenty of time to see and avoid hitting deer and whatever other animals might be crossing the road. My high-beam headlights came in handy once again on this night, as at the edge of them I saw a figure in the road. I slowed down, thinking it was an animal, and giving it time to move and run off of the highway. However, I quickly saw that it wasn't an animal. There was a person sitting in the middle of the road with a sweatshirt hoodie pulled over their head. They were staring straight down at the ground and not moving, even as I blasted my horn multiple times. I rolled up and came to a stop about 90 feet away from them, waiting for them to move and deciding what to do. I debated getting out of my truck and seeing if they were okay. Common sense stopped me as I realized that whatever the reason they were there in the middle of the highway probably wouldn't end well for me. The person in the road still hadn't moved, and it was very possible that it could have been a dummy. I started rolling forward again, going into the oncoming lane to go around the person or dummy. I was only going about 10 miles per hour at this point, just to make sure that if it was a real person, I didn't hit them at all. Suddenly, I heard a thud on my driver's side door, and I looked over to see a person in all black had jumped out on the side of my truck and tried to open my door handle. I always drove with my doors locked, I suppose exactly for situations like this. I sped up as quickly as my truck would allow, and the person who had been clinging to the side of my truck jumped off within a few seconds. I got out of there as quickly as I could, and didn't stop again for the rest of the night. I had heard stories of truck jackings happening to other truckers, but never thought that it would happen to me. I'm glad that I trusted my instincts and stayed in my truck the whole time, because who knows how the night would have gone if I had gotten out of my truck. This happened to me a couple of years ago, in my first couple weeks as a truck driver. I'm a female truck driver, which in the trucking industry is a little rare, so I've had to deal with some minor harassment from fellow coworkers. This one particular instance, though, sticks with me the most because of how new I was in the trucking business. I was doing a multiple-day overnight haul through the Midwest of the U.S. in late fall. I was driving on a boring highway when around 1 a.m. a fellow trucker merged onto the highway a bit in front of me. The other truck was still working up its speed after the merge, so I switched into the left lane of the two-lane highway to pass the other truck. As I passed, I gave my courtesy wave as I do to any other trucker that I see on the road. The man driving the other truck made eye contact with me as I passed. I was expecting a friendly smile or wave back, but he just watched as I passed, his face staying emotionless. All truckers have a channel that they can communicate with other truckers on, and only a minute after I had passed the other truck, I heard a man's voice on the channel. The voice stated that he was the driver of the truck that was now behind me. He advised me to pull over, saying that one of my tires was flat. I had been driving for a while since my last stop, but as far as I could tell, I didn't notice that I had a flat tire. If I did have a flat tire, it didn't seem to be affecting my journey much. Regardless, I spoke back over the trucker channel, thanking the man for letting me know and saying I would check it out at the next truck stop. He radioed back to me, urging me to pull over now, that if I kept driving, I might cause serious damage to the truck and potentially myself. I thought about pulling over to check my tires, but since I was a new driver, I decided not to. If I had blown a tire, I wanted to change it at a truck stop with a multitude of light to make sure that I would change it correctly. I radioed back politely that I had set my mind on checking and changing my tire at the next truck stop. The next truck stop was still 30 or so miles away, and the whole time the other trucker kept talking on the radio every couple minutes. The man kept urging me that I had to pull over, and that he could even help me change the tire if I needed it. I continued driving and eventually turned off my radio as I was getting sick of hearing his voice basically begging me to pull over. I finally approached the large truck stop and took the exit, and the other truck behind me kept going down the highway. When I got out at the stop to check my tires, I did a thorough inspection, only to reveal that none of my tires were flat or even remotely close to being flat. I was struck with a sense of chilling coldness as I pictured the man's voice on the radio begging me to pull over to fix a phantom flat tire. I'm glad that even in my inexperience as a truck driver at the time, I did not pull over. I tried to find out who was driving that truck by asking the company for help and also extensively searching for it online, but nothing ever came up. It scares me that the man is still out there driving trucks, potentially trying to lure other female truck drivers out of their trucks. One of my most traumatic experiences as a truck driver happened one foggy night a decade ago. It was late at night and I found myself driving my truck through thick, swirling fog. I'd been on the road for hours and was tired but close to the destination, so I kept pushing through. The fog had rolled in unexpectedly, swallowing the entire road. My headlights didn't do much, barely illuminating the road. I had the radio on pretty loud, hoping that the sounds of music and voices would help keep me awake. It also started raining early in the night, and the drumming of the rain on the windshield was basically drowning out the radio anyway. I strained to see beyond the mist, squinting, trying to see through the dense fog. The road signs would pop up out of nowhere, appearing suddenly and disappearing just as fast. I gripped the wheel tight, just focusing on trying to stay in my lane and not run off the road. The white lines blended into the mist, making it difficult to judge where the edges of the road were. The fog seemed to get worse. It got so bad that I thought about pulling over right there on the side of the highway. My visibility was so bad that I could only see a few feet ahead of me, so I switched on my hazards, hoping to signal to other vehicles who might be out here in the fog. Suddenly, I saw a shape up ahead. It was another truck, and its lights were barely visible. It was nice to know that I wasn't the only one out here battling the fog. I flashed my headlights partly as a friendly acknowledgement to the other driver, and partly to make sure that he saw me through the fog. As we approached each other, I realized something was wrong. The truck didn't slow down, and kept coming straight at me, not veering right or left. I started to panic as I realized the truck was not going to slow down. I slammed on my brakes, and the tires screeched. The other truck was close now. I could see the driver. It was just a silhouette behind the windshield. My heart was pounding, and I swerved to the right and narrowly missed a collision. The other truck kept going and disappeared into the fog behind me. I sat there in my truck with my hands shaking on the wheel. I tried to calm down from the near head-on collision and comprehend what just happened. Was it a mistake? Did the other driver really never see me, or was it something sinister? It was like he was trying to run into me almost. I checked my mirrors and then cautiously pulled back onto the road. I kept my speed low through the rest of the fog. My nerves were on edge, and I was constantly looking around for other vehicles. It seemed to take forever as I continued through the fog, but finally things started to clear up. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about what had happened. In the morning, I checked my truck carefully, looking for any signs of damage. There was nothing, no evidence, but I'll never forget what happened that night. One time, while driving my truck on a cross-country trip, I experienced a scary situation. I was driving through the Appalachian mountain range one evening. I had recently made a stop and got some sleep, so I was all fueled to drive through the night with all the snacks and energy drinks that I needed to keep me awake. It was nearing sunset as I drove along a nice and quiet highway. It was actually a quite scenic drive, and everything looked pretty in the sunset. I was coming up upon a person who was walking on the side of the highway. They were trying to catch a ride and hitchhike to wherever they wanted to go. I enjoyed picking hitchhikers because it made the drive much easier with someone to talk to, and everyone I had picked up previously while trucking had been nice. I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder of the highway in front of the hitchhiker and waited for them to come up to the side of my truck. a woman appeared by my driver's side window. She had a backpack on and looked tired and dirty, as if she had been camping for a couple nights. I asked her where she needed to go, and she just stated quietly that the next town would be great. I told her yes, and the next town wasn't too much farther. I thought I could get her there before it was completely dark. She then hopped in the passenger seat, and we were off. I tried to make some simple conversation during the drive, asking what she was doing out in the Appalachians and where she was coming from. She didn't give me much at all, saying very simple one-word answers, and was monotone the entire ride. All she told me was that she had been camping and was heading back home, which apparently was the town we were headed for. We arrived at the small little town in the waning hours of dusk. The woman spoke more than one word for the first time the whole trip. She mentioned that she lived outside of a town, but right off the highway, so it worked better for her if I drove a little farther past the town and dropped her off on the side of the highway right by her house. It was a simple enough request, so I said sure, and we continued down the highway. After a while, the woman had me pull over onto the shoulder of the highway. From where I was stopped, I could see a narrow dirt road heading back to a dingy-looking cabin. As the woman gathered her backpack, I kept peering down the dirt road because of how odd it was to me that she lived in this tiny, kind of run-down cabin. As I was looking at the cabin, I saw 3 men dart across my vision from inside the cabin to behind a woodpile. It happened in the blink of a second, but I for sure saw the 3 men. Just then, the woman asked me if I wanted to come inside and take a break from driving and get something to eat. I asked the woman if she lived alone in the cabin, and she responded that she did. This heightened my suspicion even farther. I probably would have declined the offer anyway, but seeing the men who left the house and hid behind the woodpile made me suspect that the woman was lying to me. I didn't want to take the risk, so I thanked her but declined and said that I had to be on my way. Maybe I was just imagining something worse than it was, but I get the chills when I think about what would have happened to me if I would have left my truck and gone down the dirt road.
I used to be a trucker for several years. This was a while ago now, but I will never forget this experience. It was only my first year on the job, and I was driving a semi-truck. I was able to sleep in the cabin of my truck, which I would often do. I remember that one time, after a long day of driving, I was making good time. Things were a little bit ahead of schedule, and I got to a place to stop for the night a little bit earlier than I normally would. I don't even remember exactly what state or city I was in, but it wasn't near any kind of major city. I went to a truck stop a little ways off the highway. It was really quiet when I got there, which was unusual, because most of the truck stops I had been to in the past were always busy. It was early though, so I figured that it would get busier. There were just a couple of other trucks there, and I easily found a place to park for the night, which was good, and then I went inside to get some food and used the restroom. When I returned to my truck, I ate and then watched the portable TV that I had with me. Several hours went by, and as I was watching my TV, I thought I heard the sound of somebody walking around right outside of my truck. I wasn't really sure why somebody would be right by my truck. I was parked kind of out of the way. Still, it wasn't a big deal to me. By now, it was starting to get late, so I figured that I should go to bed soon. I decided to go back to the truck stop to use the restroom again and look around outside. Then I would go to sleep. When I exited my truck, I didn't see anybody else nearby at all. There were just a couple of more trucks than had been there before. None were all that close to mine. I went inside the truck stop, and when I returned, things were the same. I got back inside of my truck and got ready for bed. I was pretty tired, and I fell asleep quickly. However, I woke up sometime in the night. When I woke up, I was sleeping on my side, facing the back of my truck. The first thing I noticed was that I heard a noise coming from inside of my truck. I couldn't believe it. Somebody was inside there with me. I would have to roll over to see them, and I couldn't bring myself to do it immediately. It sounded like somebody was going through my things inside. I kept lying there, pretending to be asleep. A couple of minutes went by. Things got quiet for a while, but then I heard the noises again. I slowly turned over, just my head, and looked. I just barely saw that there was somebody inside of my truck with me. They were not facing me, and I couldn't tell who they were. I considered saying something, but I decided to keep pretending that I was asleep. I had no idea how they would react. Each moment that went by was terrifying. Then I heard them stand up, and I could feel them getting closer. It seemed as though they were standing right over me. I could tell that they were only about a foot away, standing over my bed. I was lying completely still and was trying my hardest to seem like I was asleep. The person remained there for at least a minute. I'm surprised they couldn't hear my heart beating out of my chest. Then, they seemed to move away from me. Within about another minute, I then heard one of my doors opening and closing. Then it was silent. I didn't move for several moments. I was hoping that whoever had been in my truck was now gone. Finally, I was able to turn over and look. Sure enough, I didn't see anybody inside anymore. I slowly got up and looked around. They were certainly gone. I checked my doors and made sure that they were locked. The strange thing is that they were. None of my windows appeared to be broken either. I wasn't sure how whoever had been inside my truck had gotten in. I checked my stuff, and my wallet had been stolen. A couple of my other things were stolen as well, including my watch. I was frustrated, but at the same time, I was happy to be okay. I left my truck and went inside the truck stop, and I called the police. They showed up a while later, but not a whole lot could be done. They did find out, though, that the lock on my passenger side door was broken. This was a while ago, and my truck was a little old, even back then. After this happened, I only worked as a trucker for about another year. That was by far my scariest experience. This is a bizarre story from my experiences as a truck driver. I had that job for years until I moved on to a different career that was better for me. However, I have many memories from my years on the road. One time, I had been driving for a while now, and I stopped at a truck stop. This one was really busy, and I went inside the building. I remember that somehow I got to talking to a woman that was inside the truck stop. I think we both ordered some food and were waiting for it. We started out making basic conversation, and I came to find out that she also drove a truck. We got to talking about our jobs, and then ended up eating together there at the truck stop. We got to know each other a little bit, and I was happy to make a friend who was also a trucker. Things sometimes got a little bit lonely on the road, and I was a single guy at the time. I remember that the woman asked me where I was from, and then she said that she was from a city that was right near mine. I lived right by a major city, and it was a pretty populated area. After we talked, I ended up giving her my address. She told me that she wanted to send me a postcard from the next city that she was driving to. Nothing seemed weird about this in the moment, because we were having such a great conversation. I thought that I was getting along with her really well. Finally, it was time for us both to go our separate ways, but we exchanged phone numbers as well. I was looking forward to possibly seeing her again sometime when I was back home. I went on with my driving after that. For the next few days, I was on the road, but I returned home after that. I had a few days off, and I had been texting with the woman who I had met on a daily basis. I remember that one night, when I was home, there was a knock on the door at almost midnight. I lived by myself in a sort of small house in a suburb of the major city that I mentioned earlier. When I went over to the door, I decided to look out the window first. I was unsure of who would be knocking on my door at this hour. I saw there was some guy standing there. I had no clue what he was doing here or who he was. Because of this, I decided not to answer the door, but he knocked again. When I didn't answer the second time, I watched from my window as he walked around to the back side of my house. Now I was really concerned. He proceeded to make it around to my back door, and then he started pounding on it. Soon, there was banging on one of the back windows to my house. At this point, I was in the living room, which was in the center of my house. I was getting concerned that the guy would try to break in, and I took a couple steps over to the back door, and I yelled out that I was calling the cops. At first, this didn't seem to deter him at all. The man didn't say anything, and then stayed where he was. I decided that I would call the police then, and that's exactly what I did. I can't imagine he had any good intentions. I told the police exactly what was going on. When I got off the phone with them, the man seemed to be in the same spot. I would say about a minute after this, there was a crashing of glass from the back end of my house. When this happened, I got inside my bedroom and closed the door, but I didn't really hear any noises after that. I wasn't sure if the man was inside my house or not. After about 10 minutes, I heard the police at the front door. I left my bedroom carefully, but never saw anyone. When I went to the front door, the police were there, and they came inside and searched my house. They saw that a large rock had been tossed through one of my windows in the back. The guy was gone, whoever he was. After that happened, the man never came back. But the other strange thing is that the woman who I had been texting with never texted me again after that either. Everything had been going well, but she suddenly stopped texting me. I tried calling her, but the call didn't go through. I feel like these things were connected. I've never figured out exactly how or why, but it was really strange. This happened not too long after I first became a trucker. I've worked many long days and nights where I'm driving for hours and hours. One time, it was really late at night, and I'd been driving all day. I was so tired, and I knew I couldn't make it much further, so I decided to take a break and get some sleep for a few hours. I pulled over on the side of the road. I didn't bother trying to find a truck stop or anything. The road I was on had been pretty quiet, and I was only going to sleep for a few hours. I didn't even see any other cars in the distance as my truck sat there on the side of the road. The surroundings were open land and woods on both sides. I locked my doors and got to the back of my truck where I had a bed. I got under the covers and closed my eyes. I was out within seconds. That was always one of the best feelings, was laying down and falling asleep after a long day of driving. I only slept for about 30 minutes, and I woke up to the sound of knocking. It was still dark out, and the knocking was coming from my driver's door area. When I first heard this, I thought that it must be a cop who was wondering if I was in my truck or was going to tell me that I couldn't park there. I got up from my bed and went over to the door. When I looked out the window, I saw that it wasn't a police officer. There was just some guy with a hood, and I could barely see his face. He was looking up and then saw me. After this, he moved away quickly. I thought it was kind of weird, and I opened the door to see where he went. When I looked out, though, he was gone. I wasn't sure where he went, but I got back inside of my truck and locked the door. Then I went back to get some more sleep. I was still really tired and hadn't gotten enough rest. Once again, I fell asleep rather quickly. This time, I slept for about an hour, but was woken up again. I wasn't sure exactly what had woken me, because I didn't hear any knocking or anything this time. I laid there for a few moments, and then closed my eyes again to go back to sleep. But as soon as I did, I heard somebody trying to open the passenger side door to my truck. Suddenly, I wasn't so sleepy. I got up and went over to the door and looked. I didn't see anybody there. I opened the door and looked around, but saw nothing. Now, I wasn't sure what to do. Should I try to get more sleep, or should I just get out of there? I was thinking that I probably should just get out of there, and I started to get ready to leave. But not more than a minute later, I heard another banging coming from the passenger side door of my truck. It was incredibly loud. I looked over, but didn't see anything. I walked over to the door this time, but before I could get there, the knocking stopped. I looked out the window, but still saw nothing. Then I opened the door again. This time, I saw a guy running off into the woods. It looked like the same guy who had been at my truck before. After that, I got out of there. I'm not sure who that guy was or why he was messing with me. That was a long time ago, but it's still the creepiest thing that's happened in my time as a trucker. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I was driving my truck, which I own myself for my business. It's a pretty big truck, and I drive it all around the general area that I live for work. I make a lot of deliveries, and I work all hours of the day sometimes. This happened one night when I was working late. I was driving back to my company headquarters after a long day. The time was like 11 p.m. Normally, I don't work quite that late, but this was one of the busier times. I was still a ways away and in a more rural location, driving down a quiet highway. My headlights were really the only light around. But as I drove, I suddenly thought that I saw something on the side of the road up ahead. I soon realized that it looked like a person. I slowed down but kept driving. As I approached, I could soon see that it was a woman standing on the side of the road. She was very close to the actual driving lane, maybe like 2 feet away from the line. I was wondering what she was doing out here. I was not aware of any businesses or houses immediately nearby. I also didn't see a car on the side of the road that could belong to her, as if it had broken down or something. This was definitely confusing. I decided that I would pull over and ask her if she was all right. I slowed down my truck and stopped just in front of her. She looked at me and then started walking over. She walked around to my driver's side and I rolled down my window. I asked if everything was okay and what she was doing out here on the side of the road. She said that she had been in the car with her friend and they were arguing, and her friend just pulled over and made her get out of the car, then drove away. She also said that she had left her phone in that friend's car and didn't know what to do. Then she asked if I could give her a ride just to the nearest town. I happen to know the area very well. I've been driving around for years and have been in every city within probably a 50-mile radius. The nearest town was only like 5 or 10 minutes down the road. It was a small town and basically just had a couple of gas stations, a grocery store, and a couple restaurants. I agreed to give her a ride there. I told her to get in the passenger side and we began driving. I asked her where she lived and she named a city that was in the complete opposite direction. I found it a little bit odd at first and I asked her if she would rather I drop her there. It was the same distance to there, just the opposite direction. She said no, where we were going was just fine. After that, we stopped the chit-chat. It was just silence, and my radio playing quietly. Soon though, she started acting kind of strange. She randomly started laughing, an almost sinister sounding laugh. I almost asked her what was funny, but decided not to. Then, not too long after that, she started staring at me. I didn't look, and I kept my eyes on the road, but I could tell that she was looking right at me with her head completely turned to face me. It lasted for an uncomfortable amount of time, and I tried to break the awkwardness by saying something. I think I said something like, "The weather is nice tonight, isn't it?" She didn't say anything. She did stop staring at me though. Then I noticed that she was looking down. I half glanced over, and I saw that she was on a cell phone. I thought that she said she had left her phone in her friend's car. When I sort of looked over, it appeared as though she was texting with someone. I thought about saying something, and I came really close to, but ultimately I decided not to. I just kept driving. When we had made it to within about a minute of the nearby town, that's when she finally spoke again. She said to me that she didn't want me to drive her to the town anymore. She said she really needed me to drive somewhere else, a little bit further instead. I asked where, out of curiosity. She said to another city that she knew a little better. I was confused, but she gave me general directions to the area. I happened to know exactly where she was talking about because of my extensive knowledge of the area. The place that she was describing was not another city. It was a way more rural area with mostly dirt roads and woodland. I asked why there instead, and she took a long time to answer me. She finally spoke and said, "Don't worry about it." I had a really bad feeling about this whole thing. We had made it to the first city by then, so I pulled into a gas station which was still open. I stopped the truck and said that was as far as I was taking her. She was upset at first, but ended up getting out. Then I pulled away from there and left. I could see that she had been using a phone, and I was sure that she would be just fine. I really feel like she was having me drive all the way out there as a kind of setup. I'm glad that I didn't fall for it.
I work as a truck driver, and I've been doing it for about 5 years now. It's a job that I really enjoy, but it's not for everyone. I'm going to tell you the scariest thing that happened to me so far, and it occurred just earlier this year. It was about 6 months ago, and at the time, I was making a pretty standard delivery in my semi-truck. When it got late, I would usually stop at a truck stop and find a space to park. My truck is a sleeper, so I'm able to sleep in the back behind the driver's seat. I have a bed and some extra space for storage as well. One night, I had been driving all day and stopped into a truck stop to sleep. This is a truck stop that I had never been to before, and when I got there, I was surprised to see that it was mostly empty. There were only a few other trucks scattered around. This was also connected to a rest stop for normal cars and travelers as well. After parking, I went inside to take a shower and buy some food. After a long day of driving the truck in the warm weather, I always like to take a shower if possible because I would feel dirty. The food that I would get typically wasn't the best, but I never had too many options. I was inside for a little while and came back out to my truck to eat and then get some sleep. As I was eating, I watched some YouTube videos on my phone. Probably 30 minutes after I was back inside my truck, I was really tired and got into my bed, turned off the lights, then set the alarm on my phone and turned it off. It was now completely dark and quiet inside, and there was no doubt that I would be asleep within minutes. But as I laid there with my eyes closed, I started to hear a noise. It was very quiet, and I couldn't quite tell where it was coming from. I thought that it sounded like something coming from right outside my truck. Why would anybody be there though, especially at this hour? I hadn't parked directly next to anybody else. I listened some more. I realized that the sound wasn't coming from outside my truck. It sounded like it was coming from inside. Still, I couldn't make out what exactly the noises were. I sat up in bed to listen better. Things were completely silent for a while, and then I heard it again. It sounded like it was coming from about 5 feet away. I looked over to my closet. I had a small closet, and I realized that that's where the sounds were coming from. I stood up and turned on the light. Then I walked over to the closet and opened up the door. As soon as I did, I saw there appeared to be a person inside of it. They were not looking at me. I could tell that they had long hair though. I was shocked and I shut the door. After backing up a few steps, I yelled at them and asked them who they were and what they were doing in my truck. At first, they didn't respond. Then I saw the door open and it looked to be a woman inside of it. Before I could yell at her to get out of my truck, she threw something at me. It was one of my hats. Then she jumped out from the closet and threw another hat at me and ran to the front of the truck. She then opened up the front door and ran away. I walked out of the truck and tried to see where she was running, but by then she was long gone. After that, I decided to make sure all of my doors and windows were locked and closed, and then went back to bed. I have no idea how that woman got inside my truck. Maybe I left the door unlocked, as unlikely as that seems. I feel lucky that I heard her and found out that she was in there when I did. I really don't know what she had planned to do, if it was to harm me or steal something or what. Hopefully she doesn't do something like that to anybody else. I used to drive a semi-truck for about a year. It didn't end up being the right job for me, and I thought that it was very difficult. This story happened when I was still fairly new on the job. I was making a large delivery in my truck and had gotten up really early. I was going to try to get to my destination that same day, so I left it just after 4 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, it was still completely dark out at this time, and the roads were very quiet. I had to take a highway for a couple of hours, and then I would get onto a much larger freeway. The highway had virtually no cars on it at all. This made for some easy driving, which was nice. About an hour into driving, I saw a car come up in the left lane going much faster than me. The car passed me, but then changed lanes and cut me off. After that, it started slowing down as if it was coming to a stop. I changed lanes and had to do it pretty quickly to avoid hitting the guy. It's pretty difficult to come to a sudden stop in a semi-truck. My best move was to just go around him. I passed the car in the left lane and then kept going. The speed limit was 65 and I was going about 60, so I didn't understand why the guy would do that. Maybe he had a problem with his car as soon as he started passing me. I was just happy that I didn't crash into him or anything like that, but it was too close for comfort. As I kept driving, the car disappeared in my rearview mirror, but roughly 10 minutes later, it appeared again. At first, I didn't realize it, but when it started passing me again, I noticed that it seemed to be the same car as before. It passed me in the left lane again, and then went into the right lane in front of me. It didn't cut me off as much as before, but it still changed lanes sort of fast. The car was white, and it looked to be a normal 4-door sedan. It looked fairly old though, maybe 15 years old if I had to guess. As the car drove in front of me, another car came up in the left lane to pass us both. The car in front of me once again started slowing down significantly. It was really annoying. The car kept slowing down and I had to as well. I honked at the guy, hoping that he would get out of my way if he was going to go this slow. We were down to about 50 miles per hour, but he kept slowing down still. I couldn't switch lanes again to pass him this time because of the car passing us in the other lane. But then the car in the other lane did not keep going. That one slowed down as well. It started driving closer and closer to me. We were all slowing down, and I had to almost slam on my brakes to avoid hitting them both. And when we got down to like 30 miles per hour, I took an exit road that just happened to come up. I took this exit to try to get away from the cars, but they both took the exit as well. This was an even quieter road, and I think that's exactly what they wanted me to do. We all drove down that road for maybe half a mile, slowing down even more the entire time. It was me and my semi, and both of the same 2 cars, one in front of me still, and the other to my left. Eventually, we all came to a complete stop. I was really frustrated and angry, probably too much to realize that this was a possible dangerous situation. At the same time, when we did stop, I sort of got creeped out a little bit. I watched both front doors of both cars open up. 4 men got out, wearing all black, and began approaching my truck. I knew this was bad, and figured they were probably going to try to rob me, or maybe something even worse. I heard one of the men start to shout at me, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I knew I didn't have another choice, and I stepped on the gas when the man had nearly reached my truck. I hit the car in front of me, and it moved a little, but because of the power my truck had, I was able to move past them and keep going. As I sped away, I accelerated about as fast as I could in that truck, and took the first road off that one that I was on. After I was somehow able to make it back onto the highway, I called the police and reported the incident. Needless to say, I did not make my delivery that day. There wasn't too much damage to the truck, but there was still some. I'm just grateful that I wasn't robbed. A few years back, I was a truck driver. This is a job that I had for a total of 3 years. I drove a semi-truck a few times, but typically the company that I worked for would have us drive trucks a little bit smaller. I preferred driving these because they were just all around easier. One time, I was making a delivery and had to drive through the night. I had some odd hours at that job. There were times that I was nearly nocturnal with my schedule, and other times that my schedule was completely normal. Well, this time, I was nocturnal. The positive to this was that the roads were much quieter, and there was a significantly less amount of traffic. I was driving down the freeway on a cold and quiet night. As I drove through a sort of rural woodsy area, I saw a car parked on the side of the road a long ways up. It appeared to be a minivan of some kind. I decided that I would stop and see if they needed any help. I knew this was not always a good idea to stop on the side of the road and help strangers, but to be honest, I wasn't really nervous at all, and I felt like it would be a good thing to do. I pulled over a little ways behind the van and came to a stop. Then I got out of my truck and stepped out into the cold, quiet night. It was really dark in this area of the road. It wasn't very well lit at all. As I walked closer to the van, I could see that it had a baby on board bumper sticker in the back window. I assumed it was a parent, and it made me feel better about helping them. As I walked up to the front window of the van, though, I saw that there was nobody in the driver's seat. I looked to the back seats, and there was no child. I just saw one person, appearing to be a man, sitting in the passenger side back seat. He was wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up, and his head was facing down and in the other direction, as if he was trying to hide from me. I walked around over to the other side of the van to try and get his attention. When I had made it around, though, and was still in front, the back door suddenly slid open. The man jumped out and confronted me. He appeared to have something in his hand that looked to be a gun. Now, I didn't have any kind of weapon, so no matter how strong I thought I was no match for this guy if he did in fact have a real gun. The guy was maybe 10 feet away and getting closer. He wasn't pointing it at me, but I still wasn't going to stick around there any longer. I turned and ran in the other direction. There was a dense woods not too far away, and I ran for it. I made it there, and at first I heard the man running after me. I went deeper into the woods, and it was just about impossible to see anything. I tripped over something and fell, and when I sat back up, I didn't hear the man running after me anymore. I heard noise, but it was farther away. I looked from behind a tree. I could barely see back out to where the car and my truck was. The man was walking back over to the vehicles. I watched him walk over to my truck and attempt to open it. Thankfully, the doors were all locked. Then he walked back over to his van, got inside of it, and drove away. I was quick to run out of the woods and get back in my truck and leave after that. I think that man drove the minivan and put the sticker on it to get people to stop for him while he attempted to rob them. Luckily for me, it didn't work out for him. I reported the incident, but as far as I know, the man was never found.
This story takes place back when I used to drive a delivery truck for UPS a couple of years ago. The house deliveries were normally pretty easy, but oftentimes I would have to enter apartment buildings as well. A lot of times there would be a desk receptionist and a mailbox area, and I could leave the package with them. Every so often, though, I would have to bring the package directly to someone's door, especially if it couldn't fit in their mailbox. There was this one particular delivery where I had to bring a package up to someone's door. It was an older apartment building with no elevator, so I walked up the stairs with my package to the 4th floor and then went to the room number. I had thankfully found it on the directory down on the 1st floor. As I was setting the package down, the door opened, so I stood back up, deciding that I would just hand the person their package. The man who had opened the door had on a muscle shirt with holes in it, whitey-tighties, and nothing else. I was considerably perplexed by the image that was in front of me. To avoid staring at this nearly naked man, I averted my gaze into his apartment. The scene that was before me was quite disturbing. There were multiple bottles of beer as well as wine on the living room table, and in the dimly lit room, I saw what appeared to be a woman who was naked and sleeping. The man, who clearly saw I was staring into his apartment for a quick second, hurriedly slammed the door shut in my face. I wasn't quite sure what I had just seen. During the long walk back down the stairs to my truck, I was pondering what was going on in that apartment. To me, it seemed like potentially something very wrong was going on, but I also thought that it was possibly the man's wife who had passed out or something. I was still thinking about this scenario when I got into my truck and prepared to drive away. As I was pulling away from the apartment building, I saw the same man who I had just given the package to. He was outside the front doors of the apartment, crouched down next to a bush hiding, but he wasn't doing a very good job of it. This further added to my suspicion, so much so that once I had pulled away, I called the cops, letting them know what I had seen. Later that week, I found out that the police had indeed went to the man's apartment and stopped a potential case of the woman being drugged and violated. I suppose that the man had followed me out of the building to see if I would make a phone call at all while I was leaving. I can't imagine what the man would have said or even done to me if I had decided to call the cops as I was still walking out of the building. That was by far the eeriest situation that I've ever been a part of while I was a UPS driver.